Kabul has fallen. And, you know, it didn't have to be this way. We had Osama bin Laden almost 20 years ago. We had him. The CIA had Osama bin Laden at Tora Bora. And, you know, we didn't want to invade Afghanistan. George Bush didn't want to do any nation building. He said that during the debates with Al Gore. The days of nation building is over. War is always the last option. And George Bush and Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld and George Tenet, they really tried to get Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. And we had him right after 9/11. We had him in the hills of Tora Bora. And I'm going to show you some never before seen satellite footage of bin Laden getting away, because it was hard for our CIA to capture him. And our CIA, they really wanted to get their hands on bin Laden. They wanted him alive. They didn't want to kill him. George Bush and his family wanted bin Laden alive so we could put Osama bin Laden on trial and get to the truth. Tell us who exactly funded 9/11. And the only way we could really get to the truth is if we captured Osama bin Laden alive and brought him home and televised his trial for the world to see, because we're a transparent nation. We're open and let the chips fall where they may. We wanted bin Laden alive so we could put him on trial to find out what really happened on 9/11, who funded it, and who was really in on it. And if it turned out to be Saudi Arabia, who, you know, friends of the Bush family, if it turned out to be Saudi Arabia and not Iraq, I mean, it was obviously Saddam Hussein who was behind 9/11. But, you know, let's get bin Laden. And if it turns out that Saudi Arabia was behind 9/11, so be it. And you know, if we discover, I know that George W. Bush said to the CIA, if we discover that maybe my family, maybe my brother and father might have been too cozy with the Saudi royal family, maybe we were even too cozy with the bin Laden family when they were in Texas, so be it. This is America. We're transparent. We're a free and open society. We all deserve the truth, even me, George W. Bush. Let's capture bin Laden right now, put him on trial, and find out what really happened. But I want him alive, like Michael Corleone said in 2, when they shot up his bedroom. He said, find those people, but I want them alive. I want them alive. They worked so hard. They worked so hard to get bin Laden and bring him home alive. So here is a never before seen video of our CIA working with the warlords of Afghanistan in Tora Bora, desperately trying to catch Osama bin Laden alive and bring him back to America to stand trial for 9/11. Here is never before seen satellite footage of our government trying to get bin Laden. There he is. Oh, they're going to get him. There's Osama bin Laden, and there's there's the CIA, and there's some Pushtun warlords. Oh, he's getting away, but look, we have plenty of guys in Tora Bora who look how quickly they're running after him. They're going to get him. Look, they're going to get, he's going to lob one more, he's getting away. But look how hard we're trying to get bin Laden. He's taunting us. He said, come and get, and it looks like we got him. It looks like they wrestled bin Laden to the ground, and now the CIA and the Defense Department and even some members of the Taliban, they said they would deliver him to us. This is everybody working together to bring bin Laden to justice. And he's heading over to Bagram Air Force Base, and there he is. And Oh, somehow he got away. Somehow he got away. I don't know how it happened because we really wanted to get Osama bin Laden. So Kabul has fallen, and we're out of there. It seems. I think we're out of there. Jake Sullivan is President Biden's national security advisor, and we all saw those scenes of Afghanis clamoring to catch the last plane out of Kabul. And oftentimes we can lose sight of who the real victim in all this is. Who is really the ones who are suffering the most? And obviously, when you listen to Jake Sullivan, President Biden's national security advisor, the real victims are the American people, because we were so generous to the people of Afghanistan. They didn't ask us to invade because we knew that the Afghan people were too proud to admit that they needed us to invade their country and improve their lives with armed drones accidentally blowing up wedding parties and killing brides and children, and having our CIA torture innocent people at Bagram Air Force Base. They wanted that, but they were proud people, the Afghanistani people. They didn't know how to ask. Kind of like me, I could have some guests on the show, but I'm too proud to ask people to come on the show. And the Afghanistani people, please invade us. Please destroy our drinking water. We'd like an outbreak of polio. We'd like innocent people to be killed accidentally. Please come to Afghanistan. But we knew they wanted us to come. Every country in the world would give anything to have America send. What did we do? We sent 750,000 troops into Afghanistan. We stayed there for 20 years. What country wouldn't want that? But we chose you, Afghanistan. We picked you out of the chorus line, baby. We chose you. Could have been Iran. Could have been Venezuela. But we picked you. And you know what, Afghanistan? You let us down. I listened to Jake Sullivan. He's our national security advisor. And after you hear this, I think you'll all agree that the people of Afghanistan not only let us down, but they owe us a handwritten apology.
President Biden was not prepared to have American men and women continue to fight and die in the civil war of another country. We gave 20 years of American blood, treasure, sweat, and tears in Afghanistan. We gave them every capacity in terms of training and equipment to stand up and fight for themselves. And at some point, it was the time for the United States to say that the Afghan people had to stand up for themselves.
You're on your own. It's like a troubled child. It's tough love. You let us down. We gave you that civil war. We funded that civil war, and you just didn't want to fight it. I'm glad Jake Sullivan, our national security advisor, put this all into perspective for us and gave me context, because I'm sick of all this anti-American nonsense I'm hearing on Al Jazeera, BBC, even here in America, because we, America, we're the real victims here. And not to get all Freudian on you, but this is so typical of abusive relationships. We're the ones who are being abused by the people from Afghanistan. We're the victims. And what do abusers always do? They blame the victim. Somehow, we've been victimized by this 20-year invasion of Afghanistan. We're the victims here, and they blame us. Well, there are other victims besides America. And Afghanistan, you owe the world an apology for what you let us do to you. This was just not an American war. There's a lot of generosity to spread around, a lot of credit, not just America. NATO was involved, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which was set up during the Cold War to make sure Russia never invaded a Western European country because, Stalin, he had the Warsaw Pact, and that was, all those Eastern European nations who were aligned with the Soviet Union to attack America through Western Europe and, turn us into communists. And so we set up NATO. We set up NATO to defend not just America, but Western Europe. And that's what NATO is. It's to protect Western Europe. And that is why NATO took part in the invasion of Afghanistan, because at the time, George W. Bush believed Afghanistan was situated between Belgium and Liechtenstein. Simple mistake, right? I mean, he didn't know that Afghanistan wasn't part of Europe. But, mistakes are made. And so anyway, we set up NATO to defend Western Europe, and NATO believes an attack against one NATO member is an attack against all of us, even though Afghanistan really didn't attack us technically on 9/11. Al-Qaeda did. And Al-Qaeda was kind of staying with the Taliban. And, it's kind of like, when you lend your car to someone and they accidentally fall asleep behind the wheel and plow into a farmer's market and kill 30 innocent people. Well, who are you going to sue? You sue the person who owns the car, even though he had nothing to do with it. The driver had to borrow the car. He has no money. So you attack the person who owned the car. And the Taliban and Afghanistan kind of like owned the car that bin Laden was kind of driving. Sometimes he borrowed Pakistan's car, but for the most part, bin Laden was driving the Taliban's car. I mean, the Saudi princes were paying for the gas and the upkeep, but for the most part, we had to attack Afghanistan because we're pretty sure bin Laden was in Afghanistan when we launched that attack. And, if only we brought him in alive, if only President Obama kept him alive so we could learn the truth about who really was behind 9/11. Maybe it was Saddam Hussein helping bin Laden. That's what the war in Iraq was about. That's what we were told. So if they tell us the Taliban was behind 9/11, I have to believe our government. They said Saddam Hussein was behind 9/11, and they said the Taliban was behind 9/11. That's the American government. When would they ever lie to us? So 9/11, we had to hold the entire nation of Afghanistan accountable for what happened on 9/11 because we let our guard down and the World Trade Center came down and the Pentagon, our fortress, was attacked, and heads on a stick. Really, that's you just need to put heads on a stick. It doesn't matter whose, just as long as it's not Condi Rice's head on a stick. She was our national security advisor who let our guard down, and certainly it can't have Dick Cheney's head on a stick, even though we had intelligence memos that bin Laden was intent on flying airplanes into our buildings. We can't put American heads on sticks because that's un-American. So just find somebody, hopefully, preferably a person of color, and put their heads on a stick. And we were kind enough to pick Afghanistan for 9/11. We could have blamed anybody. But we chose Afghanistan because they allowed Osama bin Laden to stay in their studio apartment, and Osama bin Laden fell asleep in the apartment with a lit match, and he accidentally set fire to the entire apartment building. And so we're holding Afghanistan responsible for the whole building going down. That's the way it works because we're America. And this war has been dragging on since 2001, really. And we're not the only ones. NATO was also involved. Our friends to the north, Canada, they helped us fight in Afghanistan because they're part of Europe. And but NATO has lost its appetite for the fight in Afghanistan. Here is NATO's Secretary of General. Here's NATO's Secretary General talking 2 days ago and giving the Taliban a warning.
There must be a peaceful transfer of power to an inclusive government with no revenge or retribution.
Yes, no retribution. That was what he said. He's warning the Taliban, and he's not just speaking for NATO, he's speaking for the American people. No retribution. Taliban, Afghanistan, if you want to join our community of nations, you must abide by our sacred code of human rights. Now, you seem to be winning this one, and you seem to be in charge, but a civil war is looming. The combat is not necessarily over, and that's why we have treaties, that's why we have the Geneva Conventions, and you need to learn this stuff. You're running Afghanistan now. We want to indoctrinate you and make sure that you're joining the community of nations. And we expect, as Americans, we're the light unto the world, we expect the Taliban to obey the Geneva Conventions. No waterboarding. No torture, no black ops sites. If you expect to be welcomed into the community of nations, you have to respect the rights, especially of enemy combatants. No matter how much you might disagree with an enemy combatant, there are rules of engagement because sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and sometimes you take a prisoner, sometimes we take a prisoner, and we have rules to make sure that you're not torturing our prisoners. We know that torture doesn't work, so don't torture. You know, we have 50,000 Americans still in Afghanistan. I'll get to that in a second, and not to mention all the Erik Prince people, the private contractors. We expect you to treat our private contractors with the same dignity we treated the people who we were fighting in Afghanistan. Let's be civilized. Let's be civilized. Here's Prime Minister Boris Johnson in the House of Parliament yesterday on whether or not Britain wants to go back into Afghanistan. You would think, I would assume Britain wants to go back into Afghanistan. They've had such a positive experience, not just with this engagement, but before. I believe the British call Afghanistan the birthplace of empires. I think that's how the British remember Afghanistan. If you really want to kick off an empire, invade Afghanistan, which is known as the birthplace of empires. Let's listen to Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of Great Britain.
I do not believe that that is an option that would commend itself. I spoke to Secretary General Stoltenberg only the other day about NATO's continuing role in Afghanistan, but I really think that it is an illusion to believe that there is appetite amongst any of our partners for a continued military presence or for a military solution imposed by NATO in Afghanistan, Mr. Speaker. That idea ended with the combat mission in 2014. And I do not believe that today, I do not believe that deploying tens of thousands of British troops to fight the Taliban is an option that, no matter how sincerely people may advocate it, and I appreciate their sincerity, but I do not believe that that is an option that would commend itself either to the British people or, Mr. Speaker, to this House.
Easy for Boris Johnson to talk that way. He doesn't have his IRA in Raytheon stock or Boeing stock. some of us, I would, I won't even go there. I would never. So Germany, Angela Merkel said it didn't turn out the way she had planned. And Britain and NATO have all washed their hands of Afghanistan. Prime Minister Trudeau up in Canada is washing his hands of Afghanistan. They're just trying to get out of there. So General Mark Milley is chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the left loves him because he stood up to Matt Gaetz about critical race theory. He's for the teaching of critical race theory. General Mark Milley is. He's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So he's an American hero because he's in favor of critical race theory. We love General Mark Milley. And he's good at his job. You don't get to the top of the Pentagon without being great at your job. You're the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. You run the entire show. And you've been appointed, Mark Milley, because you've proven yourself adept at never sending our troops, our blood and treasure, into harm's way without a clear and moral purpose. We trust our children and our fathers with you. Their lives are in your hands, General Mark Milley. It is a sacred trust. You are chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The Joint Chief of Staff. And we don't just trust you with the lives of our soldiers. We trust you with the lives of all the innocent civilians we're going to kill, because precision bombing isn't so precise, and there are unforeseeable civilian casualties when making war and profits for Raytheon, where a lot of your generals end up working, which isn't fair. They also work for Boeing. You know, we trust you with the lives of our soldiers and all those innocent civilians in Afghanistan who are going to die so we can make profit for Raytheon and Boeing and McDonnell Douglas. And, you know, there are unforeseeable civilian casualties when making war. That's why we tend to fight them overseas. And we try not to kill white people overseas. But, you know, it's the unfortunate price innocent civilians have to pay when America decides to invade a country in order to keep its war machine humming. We're at a wartime economy, and we need to drop bombs. So it's unfortunate, but this is why we trust great men like General Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who wants critical race theory taught at West Point. So we on the left must embrace this man because he agrees with us on one or two social issues. General Mark Milley, yes. And maybe he can find out why they hate us overseas. You know, maybe I remember George W. Bush asked that question after 9/11. Why do they hate us? Why do people want to fly airplanes into our skyscrapers down on Wall Street or into our Pentagon? What did the Pentagon ever do to innocent third world people? What did Wall Street ever do to innocent people overseas? We'll never know. It's one of the great mysteries of life. Why do they hate America? Why? It's just unknown. It's, as Donald Rumsfeld would say, it's an unknown unknown. You know, it's like, is love a chemical thing or a biological imperative? Hard to say. Why do foreigners want to blow up American buildings after we kill their children? Who knows? Hard to say. Maybe it's their chemistry. Maybe it's nurture. Maybe it's nature. Who knows? It's one of the great mysteries of life. why, when you blow up somebody's home overseas, do they want to come to America and kill innocent civilians? Who knows? Who knows? But the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, he's on top of things. He's smart. He wants critical race theory taught at West Point. He's a child of the Enlightenment. We on the left embrace him. He's on our side. And he's smart, see? He's smart. He's educated. He wants critical race theory taught at West Point. He's smart. So let's find out from our Joint Chiefs Chairman, Mark Milley, how and why Kabul fell so quickly. He's so smart. You know, he's overseeing the curriculum at West Point. He says he wants his soldiers reading. Well, part of reading is reading intelligence. So why didn't we know this was going to happen, General Mark Milley? We give you $1 trillion a year that we know of. Then we have all the other intelligence agencies. You have so much intelligence at your disposal, General Mark Milley. You've got more intelligence agencies at your disposal. You've got as many intelligence agencies at your disposal as you do bullshit medals across your chest. That's how many intelligence agencies, Mark Milley, you have at your disposal. Count all those bullshit medals you have on your chest that you can't wait to show off. You have just as many intelligence agencies at your disposal. So explain to us why you didn't know that Afghanistan would fall in 11 days.
Well, I stood behind this podium and it said that the Afghan security forces had the capacity, and by that I mean they had the training, the size, the capability to defend their country. This comes down to an issue of will and leadership. And no, I did not, nor did anyone else, see a collapse of an army that size in 11 days.
You know, when you're making a statement like that, General Milley, you might not want to be wearing all those medals. It kind of demeans them. There are actually a lot of generals who've earned those medals. And for you to say, I didn't see this happening, take your medals off. That is, let's watch that again. Let's just watch that again.
Well, I stood behind this podium and it said that the Afghan security forces had the capacity, and by that I mean they had the training, the size, the capability to defend their country. This comes down to an issue of will and leadership. And no, I did not, nor did anyone else, see a collapse of an army that size in 11 days.
Oh, it's an issue of will and leadership on the part of the Afghan army. It's their fault. They didn't have the will and leadership. Not America's fault. No, it's never our fault. It's the army that we propped up. It's their fault. They didn't have the will and leadership. You know, General Milley, you forgot the last sentence of that statement, which should read, "And so I have now tendered my resignation, General Milley." That's usually how a statement like that wraps up. And so I bid you all adieu. You're supposed to resign after you say something like that, General Milley. I didn't anticipate the fall of Kabul in 11 days. Good night, everybody. I'm going to go write a book. I'm retiring. I can't believe Jeffrey Toobin got fired because he accidentally masturbated during a Zoom call, and because he didn't know the other camera was on, right? And he gets fired. That's worse. Accidentally masturbating on a Zoom call apparently is worse than being the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and not anticipating the fall of Kabul in 11 days. Masturbating accidentally on camera causes more damage to more people than not anticipating the fall of an army that we spent $100 billion propping up. He gets to keep his job. General Milley gets to keep his job, but Jeffrey Toobin Well, he's back on CNN, but the New Yorker fired him, and so did WNYC and NPR because he accidentally whipped out his penis. That's worse than destroying an entire nation. Okay, glad to know that. I will keep it in my pants. I will keep it in my pants. I just want to know why the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff doesn't tender his resignation. You know, Japan, they do seppuku. They have real honor. May I recommend? You love your medals. You love the honor of being a soldier. Have you tried seppuku, General Milley? What have you been doing all day? You're chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley. What else do you have to do all day other than worry about Afghanistan? What else is there? Yes, critical race theory should be taught at West Point. I agree with you. And that's why we love you on the left, because we forgot about Afghanistan. We didn't pay attention to Afghanistan because there's no draft. We lost interest in Afghanistan before 9/11 because there's no draft. But critical race theory and making sure that, our generals read and appear woke, that's why we love, on the left, that's why we love General Milley. So what were you doing for the past 5 years, General Milley? And you know what? That's unfair. That is unfair because, silly me, I'm such a narcissist, and I'm a day trader. I can only see what's right in front of me. I'm focused on Kabul and Afghanistan and not seeing the bigger picture. And that's why General Mark Milley became chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, because he sees the big picture. He's a big picture guy. There are other things in the world besides Afghanistan. And when you're chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, like General Mark Milley, you have to be able to chew gum and walk at the same time. And that's exactly what General Mark Milley, as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, did last summer. He chewed gum and walked at the same time right behind then President Donald Trump through Lafayette Park. I don't know if you remember this profile in courage, this great moment in American military history when our chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff suited up and recognized that, yes, there's a war in Afghanistan, but we need to be able to pivot at a moment's notice. Yes, Afghanistan, very important, but there are other threats to America. And that, as we all know, what was going on here on the home front, in das Homeland, here in America, the homeland was being threatened. We had peaceful protesters, most of them African American, and they were taking to the streets demanding that our innocent police stop killing unarmed black men. How dare they do that? And so General Mark Milley, the patriot that he is, he was forced to multitask. How quickly we forget that our nation was under siege last summer. Police were shooting unarmed black men, and they were showing up at Black Lives Matter protests and clubbing innocent protesters in the face because they were exercising, the protesters were exercising their First Amendment right to peacefully assemble. That is a threat to this country. When black people take to the streets and protest with no violence, that is a threat to our status quo. And so counter-protesters, mostly white, all white as a matter of fact, counter-protesters, all white, showed up and they set fire to garbage cans. Some of these counter-protesters who weren't part of BLM, they did some looting. Of course, no Black Lives Matter protesters did any looting. It was always the counter-protesters who did the looting. We getting reports that a lot of them were cops. Surprising, because, that's not what cops do. I mean, they did show up. Something like 40 cops took part in the insurrection. But normally cops don't do looting. That's not their style. They wouldn't take off their badges and loot and set fire to places. So we had a problem. We had peaceful protests last summer. No Black Lives Matter protesters. They refused to loot. They didn't show up with sidearms. And, it was horrible. Kyle Rittenhouse went up to Kenosha, and he had weapons, and he killed 2 people, but he was white, and he killed 2 Black Lives Matter protesters. This did not look good. Violence was coming from the wrong team. And hundreds of thousands of videos showed that it was white nationalists like the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys who were doing all the violence and cooperating. They were getting signals from our police officers. And the Black Lives Matter people, they were just protesting innocently. How dare they? And then suddenly hundreds, if not thousands of videos surface of our police clubbing innocent protesters in the face, using their skulls for batting practice. They even started taking down protesters in their 70s and in their 80s. Do you remember that guy? I think it was in Buffalo, some 70-year-old protester got hit in the head and went down, and blood came out of his ears. Why didn't he fight back? Why wasn't he carrying a sidearm? So the police were justified in brutalizing him. That's not fair. This country was under assault. And what choice did our police and white nationalists have other than to resort to violence? Because the Black Lives Matter people, they just wouldn't get in the game and be violent. We were a nation last summer getting ripped apart by black people, marching peacefully, asking police to stop shooting unarmed black men. And white nationalists and police officers, they had no choice but to club people in the face. We can't allow that. We can't allow peaceful protesting. And our poor chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he was trying to stay focused on Afghanistan, but events on the ground dictated otherwise. And so Donald Trump, our commander-in-chief, summoned Mark Milley, his chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to suit up. Suit up. You're going back in there. You're going to be a young man again, General Milley. Put on your camouflage and join us. And so, I don't know if you remember, but this was one of America's proudest moments when the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, suited up. He wore his camouflage, and he looked really good in it. Very slimming. He looked great. Very healthy man. And he marched behind our president, along with Attorney General Bill Barr and Ivanka Trump. They marched across Lafayette Park on an important mission because we needed to tear gas innocent protesters to make way for the president, because we needed a show of force to prove to the world that it's not just the American police who can bully innocent American protesters. Our military can do that too. And that made me proud. That's the checks and balances that we have here in the United States. The police are brutalizing American citizens, unarmed American citizens. We need to balance that by having our military brutalize innocent American protesters. That's checks and balance. So let's take a look at the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley. I think this is his finest moment. He put on his camouflage, very humble man. No lettuce, is that what they call it? The medals, no lettuce, cabbage. He didn't wear his medals. He was just a regular soldier that day in the service of his nation. Let's watch him march loyally behind our commander-in-chief to take this important hill. And now I'm going to play this. You have to look very carefully to see General Mark Milley, because he's wearing camouflage. He's on a secret mission. He's wearing camouflage. He's not wearing his general's outfit. He's just blending into the background. So pay careful attention. He kind of blends in with everybody else because of the camouflage. But if you try, you can spot him. Let's watch this great moment in military history.
Mr. President, are you prepared to use the military against U.S. citizens?
Press, we're going. Press, let's go. Come on, guys, let's go.
You see him marching? There's the president marching valiantly, about to seize the hill. And there he is, mission accomplished. He's holding up a Bible in front of that church. What a great, wow. What a great moment. Thank you, General Milley. I hope everybody was able to see General Milley. Thank you for your service. You're so humble, General Milley, wearing the camouflage that day. We almost didn't see you. It's one of your finest moments, and you're pretty much unrecognizable. You know what? I bet that's why you wore camouflage. Humility. It was about humility. You wanted to serve our nation quietly, General Mark Milley. That's why you wore camouflage. You were proud. That's why you wore camouflage. You were so proud to march behind Donald Trump that you wore camouflage because you knew that the world was watching and you didn't want to steal the camera. You knew you were obeying. You wanted to make sure that Donald Trump got all the credit. And if you had marched in your uniform with all the medals, you'd be stealing the scene. And you're a team player. That's why you just blended into the background as a character actor wearing the camouflage. And that was a proud moment for you because you survived that, General Milley. And thank you for your service, General Milley. What a terrifying day that must have been for you, General Milley, that morning. I know what it was like for you. I read about it, General Milley. That morning you woke up. You had a pit in your stomach. It was an apricot pit. You fell asleep watching the basketball playoffs, and you accidentally swallowed an apricot pit. But you woke up that morning with a pit in your stomach, and you knew you were going into the shit, as they say. And that morning, General Milley, you said goodbye to your wife, Millie. That's General Milley's wife's name, Millie. And they call her M&M, which is great, since Mark Milley has the same initials. He's M&M, she's M&M, and they saved a fortune on monogram towels. Millie, and Mark Milley. And her middle name, Millie's middle name is Vanilli. Because she doesn't really have the courage to say what's on her mind. So he kind of dubs in her thoughts. Millie Vanilli, Milley, the wife of General Mark Milley, who, as of today, is still the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. What a great leader. That's how we end up fighting a war for 20 years in Afghanistan, because of people like General Mark Milley, who completely screw the pooch but refuse to do the honorable thing and retire. That's how we end up fighting in Vietnam for close to 2 decades, and how we end up in Afghanistan for 20 years, because of people like General Mark Milley, who don't know when it's over. It's over. Your career is over. There's a thing called accountability, General Mark Milley, but you know what? I'm being rough on you. I'm being rough on General Mark Milley, and I apologize. You're a general, and we have to show respect. We have to support our generals, not the troops. You know me. I don't support the troops. I support the generals. That's my position. I support the generals and I support the military-industrial complex. That's my position on this show. We blame the people who we invaded, not innocent generals who put their reputations on the line, and they pay a heavy price when they screw up. General Mark Milley is paying a heavy price for screwing up. Not sure what it is, but I'm sure he's paying a heavy price. But Jeffrey Toobin accidentally whips out his dick and he gets fired, but not General Mark Milley. Because I'm insensitive. I don't know what it's like to serve our country the way General Mark Milley did that morning when he took Lafayette Park for our president. Last summer, America in flames. General Mark Milley kisses Milley goodbye. His wife Milley kissed her goodbye. And as he got into his limousine and headed for the Pentagon to suit up for his mission, he didn't know if he was coming home that night. He had no idea, because it was Wednesday, and that's shrimp scampi night at the Officers Club. And that usually bleeds into a poker game, which ends at 4 a.m. So I might as well crash on my couch in the office for a few hours and then get a jump on the next day. He didn't know if he was coming home that day. It was shrimp scampi night, the officers' quarters. So General Milley, is he still chairman of the Joint? He's still chairman of it. Never say quit. Never say quit. Leave no paycheck behind. That's the motto of our Joint Chiefs of Staff. Don't leave any money on the table is the message of our Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's still chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He gets to be chairman of the Joint Chiefs, but Jeffrey Toobin plays with his joint. Maybe I should resign. So anyway, thank you, General Milley. I'd like to meet you sometime. And thank you personally for putting on that camouflage outfit and playing dress up and putting it all on the line so President Donald Trump, getting a little choked up here, could hold that Bible upside down for that photo op in front of the church. God bless you, General Mark Milley. And I hope you get a medal. I know there isn't much room on that chest. And, you know, you have a pretty broad chest. I don't know if those boobs are real, but you got a big chest there, General Mark Milley. And even with that big chest, there still is not enough room for all those medals. And why haven't you gotten a medal for the Battle of Lafayette Park? I hope they have medals for photo ops. There should be medals for photo ops. Flash bulbs can be very blinding. So anyway, thank you, General Mark Milley. Come on the show. And we'll talk before you kick open my door and arrest me. So how did this happen? How did a war last for 20 years? Well, we don't quit. We're not a nation of quitters here in America. General Mark Milley. Yep, he's still there. We're not a nation of quitters. That's one of the reasons we haven't, this war lasted 20 years. We think it's over. We'll see. Oh, wait a second. President Dwight David Eisenhower is here. He's phoning in and he wants to explain. This is great. Now, some of you may not remember or know who General Dwight David Eisenhower is. He was president in the 50s. And before that, he led the D-Day invasion. He led the invasion of D-Day. He's an American hero. And he says he wants to explain how we ended up in Afghanistan for 20 years. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, General Dwight David Eisenhower, who my father served under.
Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
Yeah, time kind of passed this guy by. He's not relevant anymore. First of all, he's completely bald. He goes on television. No baseball cap? Come on. Different time. It was a completely different country, and warning about the military industrial complex. We don't need to hear that, General Eisenhower. Listen, my father loved you, and you did save Europe from the Nazis. Not so sure we would support you. Half this country would not support you fighting fascists right now. That was a different time. There are people in America who would be more forgiving of the fascists. But, it's cute and quaint, and you don't understand our military establishment in the 21st century, General Eisenhower, because we've never been safer because of our military establishment. Those jobs, when you work for Raytheon or Boeing, those jobs, it's for life. It's for life. And if you own stock in Boeing or Raytheon, we've never been safer. Those dividends, they go up every year. So I don't know what you're talking about. This country has never been safer. And, did you see Donald Trump holding that Bible up in front of the church? Look how safe we all are in this country. Look, when you were fighting Germany, and that was a quaint war. It was a cute little war, World War II, General. Good for you. You called it the War Department. And we've changed. The country has changed. It's now the Defense Department, which means we're defending Americans. Okay? We're not making war, General Eisenhower, the way you did. We're defending Americans all over the world. It's the Defense Department now. When you were there, it was the War Department. Now it's just defending Americans all over the world, even in places where Americans aren't living. That's how defensive we are when it comes to protecting our civilians. We will attack a country to defend Americans, even if there are no Americans living there. So I love you, General Eisenhower, but you're clueless. Your time has passed. You had a quaint little war, and you deserve some credit, but stay out of this. And we need to respect our military-industrial complex. For example, right now, we have about 50,000 Americans temporarily stranded in Afghanistan. And certainly our Defense Department has the equipment to help our fellow citizens, right? And so let's ask our defense secretary, General Austin, who used to work for Raytheon. Then he went to work for the Pentagon. Then he went back to work for Raytheon. Then he went back. I mean, he should be an astronaut. You know, in that revolving door, that centrifuge thing they test astronauts in. These generals should be astronauts. They could survive, 5G. Who knows what they could survive without a helmet on, going in and out of the Raytheon and then going back to the Pentagon. His head must be spinning, but no, he's General Austin. This is why he is our defense secretary. And when he was at Raytheon, he was making defensive weapons to protect Americans. And we spend a lot of money. So let's ask General Austin what kind of equipment our Defense Department has ordered from, Boeing, Raytheon, to protect those 50,000 civilians who are stuck in Afghanistan. Certainly all the money we spend on defense, I can't imagine that we haven't figured out a way to defend our people in Kabul. So, General Austin, who's in charge of making sure that the 50,000 Americans who are stuck in Kabul, who's protecting it? Is it the Marines? Is it our army?
We're working hand in glove with the State Department, which is leading the whole of government effort to notify and process American citizens who are leaving, and to urgently identify and process Afghan applicants as well.
The State Department is protecting our citizens in Afghanistan, not the Marines, not the Army. The state. Which branch of the military is the State Department? Is that like the Space Force? No, the State Department. Those are diplomats. We're asking career diplomats to protect the lives of 50,000 Americans in the middle of a war. Great. I feel much safer. Well, I'm being hard on the Pentagon. We've only given them $1 trillion this year that we know of. Certainly, the State Department, certainly those career diplomats who not just speak English, they speak French. Certainly they're equipped to rescue these stranded Americans. Certainly all this money we've spent on equipment, we're going to provide them with the equipment they need to protect our civilians. Let's see what we've got there.
Someone in an in extremis condition or circumstance versus going out and collecting up large numbers of American citizens.
Do you have the capability to go out and collect Americans?
We don't have the capability to go out and collect up large numbers of people, Barr.
We don't have equipment to collect American people. I bet we would have that equipment to collect and round up Americans if they were protesting the invasion of Afghanistan. I bet that equipment would suddenly surface. But we don't have the equipment in Kabul to collect the Americans who are stuck in Afghanistan. Okay. I need a laugh. It's time to look at some really stupid people. I like to make fun of stupid ignoramuses. And it's summer. The world is depressing. It's time to laugh at morons. And who better to turn to than Don Jr., right? There's no bigger asshole than Don Jr. This will make us all feel superior. Let's listen to the idiot son of Donald Trump, Don Jr. Let's see if he's sober. Let's see if there's anything dripping from his nose. Let's have a big laugh now at the expense of the idiot Don Jr.
Joe Biden gets a total pass. Lloyd Austin, a little while ago, I was watching a press conference. Well, we don't have the capability to really get people out of Afghanistan. They've shut down the access points to the Kabul airport. You saw yesterday the embassy. And now when I say embassy, we got to use air quotes because the embassy doesn't exist. The embassy has fallen to the Taliban. So simply a bureaucrat acting as the embassy says, make your way to Hamid Karzai Airport, though we cannot guarantee your safety. So now we have 10 to 40,000 Americans stranded there. They pulled out all of our diplomats. They pulled out most of our military. They gave up Bagram Air Force Base that we could have utilized for these purposes before dealing with the civilians. Think of how stupid you have to be. I mean, this is not rocket science, amazingly enough, and yet they still botch it. Then they say they can't get it. Now they've shut off the access points the Taliban has to the airport. So I think Joe Biden has literally created perhaps the largest hostage situation in the history of maybe the world.
You know, I can forgive a lot of things. I can forgive incompetence. Mistakes are made. And I have to say, Joe Biden, he inherited a difficult situation. I can forgive a lot of things. But when you create a situation where Don Jr. has a sober and measured response to an international crisis, that is unforgivable, Joe Biden. That is unforgivable. I thought we could laugh at Don Jr. And now he comes across as measured and sane, which is insane when Don Jr. is making perfect sense. So the Taliban have taken General Mark Milley. He's still chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Talk about accountability. So the Taliban are in charge of Afghanistan, and they held a press conference in the same room where the old Afghanistan government, the one that we were propping up, would hold their press conferences. Like last week, Ghani was holding his press conferences there. Now the Taliban, meet the new boss, they held their press conference. They're holding their press conferences in this building that we built. And, you know, there is a vibrant media in Afghanistan. We've been there for 20 years. And there are brave journalists there. We could learn something from those people. And these journalists, I'm being serious here, they asked the Taliban difficult questions. You know how dangerous it is to be a journalist in Afghanistan? The journalists in Kabul asked the Taliban some difficult questions. They asked a Taliban spokesperson if their version of Sharia law, they've announced that they're going to be running Afghanistan through their interpretation of Sharia law. They asked whether or not the Taliban's interpretation of Sharia law will include freedom of speech. And here's what the spokesman for the Taliban said.
This question should be asked to those people who are claiming to be promoters of freedom of speech, who do not allow publication of all information. I can ask Facebook company. This question should be asked to them.
Okay, so that wasn't Robert Smigel dubbing the voice. That was real. And we did that on the last show with Rudy Giuliani. That was actually the Taliban spokesman saying, if you're so worried about freedom of speech, why don't you talk to Facebook about their censorship? Kind of similar position that the Republicans have, interestingly enough. Same core religious tenets and political tenets, just different book. And they are keeping Facebook in Afghanistan. It's not going to be called Cover Your Facebook. And if you want to mute someone on Twitter, you just cut off their fingers so they can't press send. That's the new social media rule in Afghanistan. Well, there's another war, believe it or not. There's another war on another front. It's our war against COVID. And I don't have to remind any of you that it's not going well. President Trump, former President Trump, went on Maria Bartiromo on Fox News. And this is there's some gravitas here because it's highly unusual for a former president to comment on the work of the new president. It's considered unseemly. Traditionally, ex-presidents remain silent for the good of the country. They don't want to sow division. So when a president waits, and President Trump has waited his duly allotted time, when he finally speaks out, it carries a lot of weight. This is big. This is a former president of the United States maybe criticizing the current president. Here is Donald Trump, who came out of semi-retirement to go on Maria Bartiromo's talk show on Fox to talk about the war against COVID, because this is a war, the way George W. Bush started the war in Afghanistan, Donald Trump started the war against COVID. And I haven't seen this clip, but I would assume the ex-president is going to tell us to rally behind Joe Biden and wear a mask and social distance and most importantly, get a vaccine. You would think that. You would think that, let's see. Okay. You would think that I would figure out how to use this technology by now.
We had that thing rocking, and he's now president, and he's doing a lousy job at coronavirus. Coronavirus is back. If that ever happened to me where it came back, okay, when I left, it was virtually gone. It was over. It was a path. Now it's coming back through the Delta.
Yes. I was having technical difficulties. Did he say everybody should get a vaccine and we should rally behind our president, that this is a bipartisan battle against COVID? I wasn't paying attention. I'm sorry, I had technical difficulties. I would assume that the ex-president said, let's come together and beat this thing. Anyway, there is a war going on. We have Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, fighting the war in Afghanistan and the war against protesters in Lafayette Park. And we have a Surgeon General. We have a Surgeon General who is also fighting for us, taking the war to COVID. Let's hear what he had to say yesterday. I said, let's hear what, okay. This is the Surgeon General of the United States.
We are announcing our plan to stay ahead of this virus by being prepared to offer COVID-19 booster shots to fully vaccinated adults 18 years and older. They would be eligible for their booster shot 8 months after receiving their second dose of the Pfizer or Moderna mRNA vaccines. We plan to start this program the week of September 20th, 2021.
Okay, so we're going to need booster shots. Makes sense. We're not absolutely certain how long the immunity lasts, and we should do what our Surgeon General tells us to do. We're approaching, 600,000 dead Americans? This is more Americans have died from COVID than in World War II. And what do you say, Donald Trump?
You know what? That sounds to me like a money-making operation for Pfizer. Okay? Think of the money involved. An extra shot, that's tens of billions of dollars. How good a business is that? If you're a pure businessman, you say, you know what? Let's give them another shot. That's another $10 billion of money coming in. The whole thing is just crazy. You wouldn't think you would need a booster. When these first came out, they were good for life. Then they were good for a year or two, and I could see the writing on the wall. I could see the dollar signs in their eyes of that guy that runs Pfizer. The guy that announced the day after the election that he had the vaccine. But we knew that, and I knew that.
Yeah, he announced it November 9th. You're right. A few days after the election.
So what the president is saying is we should all come together and stand with the Surgeon General and get a booster shot if necessary, and that everybody should go out there and get vaccinated because it's perfectly safe. That's former President Donald Trump telling everybody to get that booster shot, and let's all come together like we did during World War II. Get vaccinated, and let's beat this virus. So this is a democracy. Around the world, we're seeing a rise of authoritarian leaders who don't trust their own citizens to make informed decisions. But not here in America, because our leaders understand that democracy only survives with a well-informed citizenry. That's what it's all about. Americans understand that while we may have differences of opinion on, say, vaccine passports, we can meet in the town square and have reasoned debate. For example, San Diego, they have a city hall, they have a mayor, and they're trying to figure out how best to reopen so businesses can thrive and people don't die. Some people are saying maybe we should have a vaccine passport where if you can show proof that you've been vaccinated, you can come into this restaurant, you can come into this building, you can come into this movie theater. So only vaccinated people are in closed buildings, especially during the autumn and winter when we all bundle together. It would be nice if everybody were vaccinated. And don't you want to eat out? Don't you want to go to a restaurant and make sure that the people next to you who are talking and coughing and laughing are vaccinated so they don't spread the variant? You don't end up with a breakthrough case. And that's the beauty of democracy. Some people are against vaccine passports. They think it's a slippery slope. But unlike an authoritarian nation like Hungary, for example, here in America, we have open debate. We believe in freedom of speech, and we want to hear from everybody. We get to hear from everybody, and then individually, we do a sober analysis of what is right and what is wrong. We hear from everybody. We hear from doctors, we hear from lawyers, civil libertarians, and an ordinary American citizen who just wants to give his opinion.
You're about to open a pit of hell. You do not get a vaccine passport put on us. You know, as the population who's in control, you know that the people who are the politicians, once you get a power, you will never relinquish it. Do you think that the 4 feet of marble that holds you above high in this chamber will help you from the fate of humanity which you are unleashing? No! It won't! Your children and your children's children will be subjugated! They will be asked, how many vaccines have you had? Have you been a good little Nazi? Hail Fauci! Hail Fauci! Hail Fauci! Hail Fauci! There's been a lot of talk about the Nuremberg Code. Well, I brought you a copy. You are all in violation of Section 1. Yes, you, Dr. Wooten. You are in violation of the Nuremberg Code, which is international law. And the definition is...
Thank you, sir. Your time has expired.
I love that. Thank you, sir. Your time has expired. Oh, thank you. Just... I like that guy. I think I'm not a psychiatrist, but I think there's something that's bothering him, and it has nothing to do with vaccine passports. I think there's something else bothering him. I think the woman he shares his bed with, I think they had a little spat that day. I think he has a very healthy sex life, and maybe that morning his sexual partner might have nagged him about something, and he brought that into the meeting. But he looks like he comes from a loving relationship, and we should listen to people like that. They're good people. Well, in times like this, we need to hear from our citizens, like that gentleman, and but we also need leaders. We're a republic. We elect leaders to lead, and the Republicans they have their leaders, especially in the South, where COVID seems to be getting worse. And the Republicans believe in states' rights. They're champions of the 10th Amendment. They view each state as a laboratory of democracy. So we can test different ways to fight COVID in each different state. That's what the Republicans believe. Okay? For example, Alabama is run by a Republican. Her name is Kay Ivey, and she's the governor of Alabama. They're having a serious outbreak of COVID down there in Alabama. And Kay Ivey and the Republicans believe that this is about personal responsibility, that this is all about personal responsibility, and you should get a vaccine, and we should blame people if they don't. So this is Kay Ivey, and I think this is a reasonable, I agree with her, by the way. This is a Republican governor of Alabama, and I'm being serious. I agree with her. If I could play it, I would agree with her.
The new cases in COVID are because of unvaccinated folks. Almost 100% of the new hospitalizations are with unvaccinated folks. And the deaths are certainly occurring with unvaccinated folks. These folks are choosing a horrible lifestyle of self-inflicted pain.
Besides, this emotional plea you just gave us, what is it going to take to get people to get shots in ours?
I don't know. You tell me. Folks supposed to have common sense. But it's time to start blaming the unvaccinated folks, not the regular folks. It's the unvaccinated folks that are letting us down.
But as the leader of the state, don't you think it's your responsibility to try and help get this situation under control?
I've done all I know how to do. I can encourage you to do something, but I can't make you take care of yourself.
I've done everything I know how to do. That's it. You're on your own. I'm a Republican. It's your fault if you get the virus. I like that. I kind of do. Just it's your fault. There's a doctor, I believe in Florida. We'll get to DeSantis in a second and his big investment opportunity for everybody. But there's a doctor who posted a sign. He said, if you're unvaccinated and you come to me with the virus, I will not treat you. I think that might be in violation of the Hippocratic Oath. I'm not sure. But, you don't want the vaccine. I like what Kay Ivey said. It's your responsibility. It's your fault. And we can blame you. We're not allowed, that's the problem with being woke. We have to understand everybody. Well, the Republicans give me permission to blame the unvaccinated. So that's Republican Governor Kay Ivey from Alabama doing the tough love, blame the people who won't get vaccinated. But there are other Republican laboratories of democracy. Texas, for example, where Governor Greg Abbott, very brave man, he doesn't want you wearing a mask. And he kind of sort of thinks you should get a vaccine, but maybe not. It's up to you. Do your own research. Trust yourself, not the doctors. Get on the internet. That's the most reliable source of information about medicine, is just going on the internet. That's the message from that laboratory of democracy, Texas. And Governor Greg Abbott, and I want to show the piece of shit respect. This is what the idiot governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, said this week.
This is Governor Greg Abbott. As you may have heard by now, I have tested positive for COVID-19. I test myself every day, and today is the first day that I tested positive. The good news is that my wife continues to test negative. Also want you to know that I have received the COVID-19 vaccine, and that may be one reason why I'm really not feeling any symptoms right now.
The vaccine may be one of the reasons I'm not feeling any symptoms. Maybe. I don't know. I got the vaccine, and I now have a breakthrough case. Maybe I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a stupid mouthpiece for the Koch brothers. I'm just the governor of Texas. I'm an ignoramus. I don't know, but, I got the vaccine, and now I've got the virus, but I'm not being hospitalized. I'm not feeling all that. But maybe I don't know. That's up for you to decide whether or not the vaccine works. Maybe the reason I'm not feeling sick. 99.9% of everybody who gets the vaccine doesn't need hospitalization. Nobody dies from breakthrough cases if they get the vaccine, Governor Abbott. But maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's not for me to decide. What do I know? I'm just the governor of Texas. By the way, his wife has tested negative. He's tested positive, and we're supposed to be surprised that his wife didn't get it from him because do you think any woman comes within 6 feet of that piece of human excrement? Like his wife has shared his bed ever? Yes. Well, and finally, there's another laboratory of democracy, more like a petri dish of democracy. And of course, I'm talking about Florida. And we have Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, who doesn't believe in masks, doesn't want anybody who works for the government wearing a mask, and not really keen on vaccines. In fact, he's unveiled a new plan to fight COVID, and it is Get COVID. Just drive into the skid. I'm being serious. He's talking about monoclonal antibodies. He's way behind, way ahead. He's behind monoclonal antibodies because it cures COVID, he's convinced. And so don't wear a mask. Don't get a vaccine. We're going to provide you with the monoclonal antibodies so you can get the virus and then we can treat it. And the fact that one of his top donors also has invested in this treatment, that has nothing to do with this. That has absolutely nothing to do with this new initiative that Governor Ron DeSantis has unveiled in Florida, which is get the disease, take the new medicine. Forget the vaccine, monoclonal antibodies. And the fact that one of my biggest contributors to my presidential campaign owns one of these companies has nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it. Let's listen to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, because I think he's onto something. I really do.
It's going to be 7 days a week. There's a standing order in place by the Surgeon General that if you qualify, you can come. You don't even necessarily need a prescription because of that standing order. It's important to point out, because there's so much nonsense that gets put out there. There's a lot of misinformation put out, unfortunately, by a lot of corporate press. This treatment for patients is free. You come in and you get it. Do not let anyone tell you that you're going to be charged thousands of dollars. That is a lie. That is a lie that is being disseminated for political purposes to try to dissuade people from seeking life-saving treatment. And honestly, that's reprehensible. There's always people trying to push political agendas, partisan narratives, regardless of facts, trying to gaslight people, trying to pursue their own interests, even if it's not going to be helpful for people, even if it may dissuade someone from seeking a life-saving treatment. And this is no place for those phony narratives, for political posturing, or for partisanship. The fact of the matter is, if you have high prevalence and you have people who are coming down with COVID, what are their options? And this.
For those of you who are listening, this is a podcast, most of you are. He's standing in front of a podium, and emblazoned across the podium are the words, "Early treatment saves lives." So when you get COVID, and you're going to get it because you live in Florida, it's important to get early treatment. Get those monoclonal antibodies that one of my top donors has a major investment in, and it's going to be free. It's going to be totally free because the state of Florida is going to pay for it. Your tax dollars at work, feathering the nest of Governor Ron DeSantis's top donors who wants to push monoclonal antibodies on the people of Florida. So what better way to drum up business for monoclonal antibodies than by telling the people of Florida, don't wear a mask? It's genius. Early treatment saves lives. Yes, early treatment. Preventative medicine, why go for preventative medicine? Like a vaccine? There's no money in vaccines. Pfizer's getting all that money. So forget preventative medicine. Go with early treatment, monoclonal antibodies. That's how we save lives. Early treatment. Don't give up spicy foods. Get, Nexium or whatever they, don't change your lifestyle until you're almost dead. Then we have a drug for you. And you'll probably die anyway, but you had a comorbidity, so we can't prove anything. Go with Ron DeSantis. Trust that. This is why we need laboratories of democracy that are run by Republicans, so we can pick and choose and decide what works and what doesn't work. Now, as for me, I prefer the real Republican laboratory of democracy. Forget Kay Ivey and the tough love in Alabama. Forget Greg Abbott in Texas. Forget Ron DeSantis. The real Republican laboratory of democracy is the church. You want to cure COVID? The church. That's the laboratory of our Judeo-Christian democracy. One man, one vote. And of course, that man is Jesus. And we need leaders to talk to Jesus for us. That's the laboratory of democracy that will save lives. And I choose Kenneth Copeland, the minister, Kenneth Copeland, a terrific Republican leader. And quite frankly, you don't need a vaccine. You don't need a mask. You don't even need monoclonal antibodies. You don't need Medicare, Medicaid. You don't need any of this stuff when you have a healer like Kenneth Copeland. Take a look at Kenneth Copeland healing an American.
Yes, it is. Glory to God. You're not bound to this chair. The day will come, you'll walk out of it. In the name of Jesus. Thank you, Lord. 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 Now then, you guys, just help him up. Help him up. The power of God's all over him. He's not hurt. He's not hurt. Praise the God. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord God. Praise the Lord God. Praise the Lord God. Oh, I like the color of that mask there. You knew I'd like that one, didn't you?
I like the color of that mask. If, for those of you listening, there was a man in a wheelchair waving his hands, heal me, heal me. And Kenneth Copeland put his hands on the guy's forehead and pushed him back on the wheelchair, and he went crashing down on his head, and he didn't get back up. But Kenneth Copeland kept walking. Pick that man up. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Pick that man up. He's not hurt. Praise the Lord. That's just push a man over in a wheelchair and keep on walking. That's the American way. That's why General Mark Milley, still chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. You see a guy in a wheelchair and you say, I'm going to heal you, and you touch him and push him and he falls over onto his head, and then you get somebody else to clean up the mess.